to the Queen, my chums. Get your tea and scones, because you will be chuffed at the chinwag we had with Patrick Jephson. Take it away, Jasmine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncover. I am very excited to announce today's guest, Patrick Jephson, media risk specialist, and he's going to tell us a lot more about that, and former Princess Diana Chief of Staff. I'm just thrilled to have Patrick on. But before I barrage him with many questions, which I'm sure you all want to know about, I just give a short intro to Patrick and his background. Patrick specializes in media risk, brand and reputation management, protocol and cross-cultural communications, which will be interesting because I'm sure he's going to share some international stories with us. And as I mentioned, he's the former Chief of Staff of Princess Diana, and he was responsible for every aspect of the organization and public duties worldwide. He's been a senior director at Lobel Communications in London. He's been a contributor to ABC News, writer and editor for international media, and is a New York Times best-selling author, which I definitely want to dig into. What I love about his background is he's been a lieutenant commander in the Royal Navy, and as we had on our first episode, a police chief, so I think there's a military theme here, which I'm excited to explore. So this is Uncover, and this is all about uncovering the truths about doing business in somewhat complex situations to really deliver advice to those of you out there that are either executives or entrepreneurs looking to build your brands and grow your practices. So the first thing that I'm sure we want to hear about is if you could just tell us a little bit about background and actually how you got into doing what you're doing today.
Well, I got into media work really by accident. It didn't dawn on me one day that I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. However, I got appointed, as you heard, to royal duty in 1988, working for Princess Diana. And the way the Princess Diana story turned out also reflects the way my story turned out. It wasn't a traditional courtier's career. It turned out to be actually the launch of an extraordinary worldwide brand Diana. And as the film producer David Putnam said of me, that I was the producer of the Diana show. And The Economist magazine said that I was the brand manager for brand Diana. So I started to learn about the media, how the media works, what goes well, what fails. Really learning on the job. There were no second takes. You had to deal with the situation as it was, and you sank or swam. And luckily, I'm glad to say we didn't just swim. Most of the time, we flew.
I love it. So a couple of things in there that you said were pretty interesting to me. One that I want to maybe wrap our arms around a little bit. You talked about when you fail in the media. So I'd love to maybe to talk a little bit about how to avoid failures or how to recover from failures in the media if you're an executive with the spotlight on.
That's a very good question, Jasmine, because my experience is that executives, especially senior executives, have a rather naive view of the media. That if they're getting lots of media, that must be a good thing. Quite often when I do pitch work here to prospective clients, they just want quantity of profile. They don't want quality. And a lot of the time we have to explain to them, are you sure you want lots of media? Because you just got to look at something like Equifax this morning that's facing class actions.
Terrible.
There is such a thing as too much media. There's a fabulous story of a business executive in England, Gerald Ratner. He was a boss of a very successful jewelry empire. He got rather hubristic, very proud of his media profile, his ability to turn everything to magic. And guess what? He got so arrogant about his own media Midas touch that he was disparaging about his own product on air, and that brought about the collapse of the share price, his career, the family name, the lot. So quality of media coverage, and most of all, an understanding of what you are trying to achieve. What is your strategy? Very often clients come to me and say, I want to do this and this. Actually, I say to them, let's have a discussion more about what your long-term objectives are, and then let's discuss how we might get there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I agree with you. You're talking about the brand and having a strategy behind it. And I think, you know, today you can't hide, right? Nothing is so private anymore, unfortunately. You know, you kind of, everybody's in the public eye and everybody's, you know, looking you up. So, so it is about the strategy and it is about managing that strategy. So I want to shift a little bit into, you know, the area of that, you know, you can't hide, and you have to be real and you have to be authentic. So I want you to talk a little bit about how you work with either Princess Diana or your clients today about getting them to tell the truth, how to be authentic, how to shape their brand so that it really does resonate and the real them is coming out.
Well, I would just correct you on one thing, Jasmine. I don't necessarily believe that you have to be public. You don't have to be out there. There are plenty of very successful business executives who you don't hear about, who are very discreet. They keep a low profile. That suits them. It probably suits their brand. And if that's what you want to achieve, if that's what's going to be best for you, we can help you do that. One of my biggest clients was an international ship owner. Most of my work for him revolved around keeping him out of the news, not because he had anything to hide, but that just suited his style. So you don't have to be out there. And indeed, I would say if you're out there, it's because you have chosen to be out there. That is a choice, and it's a choice that a lot of people get wrong. But authenticity, truth, yes, that's the secret to successful branding, because the public, especially today, they're very savvy, they're well informed, and you can fool them some of the time, but you can't fool all of them all of the time. And what will happen too often is that when you're having a bad day, when your product is in crisis, when you've had a data hack, when you have some embarrassing personal scandal at the top of the company, that is when your brand is under the most stress. That is when you will be tested for authenticity, for what we call forgivability. We market, we deliver it's almost a brand of our own, forgivability. How do you make sure that when the bad day comes, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt? We've all seen brands disappear overnight because they didn't handle a crisis well, and others that survived. Indeed, they used the crisis as a way of pivoting to their own advantage, and that is forgivability.
I love that, forgivability. Is there any way that you can foresee bad things happening? Let's say you're an executive and you're building, a lot of clients that I work with are executives that are transitioning to a higher role, or they're just starting to get out there in the public. So, you know, do you come into any situations where you can foresee kind of stumbling blocks or bad things they make choices with the media? Do you have any examples of that?
Well, yes, you can foresee a lot of problems. This is where a crash course in understanding the British tabloid press has been very helpful for me. And again, I'm fortunate in a sense in that I have both been the subject of tabloid stories, but I have also, in my career as a journalist, written for the tabloids. So one of the things that at my little consultancy, JephsonBeaman, one of the advantages we have is that both I and my partner, Bill Beaman, have been working journalists. We still are. And therefore, unlike a lot of public relations consultancies, we can look at you and say, if I were a journalist, this is what I'd be writing about you. So if particularly an individual executive comes and talks to us about their own brand, we don't look at them as if they were a client whose brand we were trying to promote. We initially look at them as a brand that we are trying to test. We are looking at it as a journalist might look at it, the way a fox looks at a chicken. And that way you can pretty quickly predict where the threats are going to come from, where the areas of weakness are.
Mm.
A lot of our competitors, I know, tend to shore up the egos of anxious executives. They give them the impression that they can write tomorrow's headlines, that they can cover up the bad news, and for a while you might, but not in the long run. And it's not the secret to successful branding for an individual or an organization.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy that you brought that up, and that's one of the reasons for this podcast, Patrick, is telling the truth about this stuff, because you're right. It's all about like chasing a shiny object or believing in somebody without really testing the water. So I'm very glad you brought that up, because that's what I stand for. And getting to that point, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what your personal mission is in your work and what you stand for, some of the things you stand for.
Well, we didn't sit down and ask ourselves what our mission was. We haven't gamed this out. We haven't done a Hillary Clinton focus group, getting 48 mission statements and deciding which one flew best with the focus group. We have a simple internal philosophy, which is to do interesting work for nice people. That suits us
Agreed.
very nicely. But in terms of mission, I would say that it's one of simplifying. There is a trend, and it's largely thanks to digital media, but it's accelerating, of overcomplicating things. Reputation is not complicated, and work on branding is not complicated, and it doesn't require lots of complicated language and obscure jargon and totally self-defeating acronyms. It's simple, and we believe in simplifying lives for our clients, simplifying messages, using simple, direct language, actually doing almost what communications people have forgotten: communicating. The number one myth about communications is that communications have actually occurred. Too often communications are one-way traffic. It's like the fashion for thought leadership. Before you decide that you're a thought leader, ask yourself who your followers are. What is it about you that would make you worth following? What is it about your thought leadership message that anybody would want to spend a minute reading about, let alone acting upon? You have to be very, very black and white, very simple. What are you trying to achieve? A little test we do with our clients quite often when they give us copy to work with, or messages they want transformed into easily communicated sound bites or ideas. I make them stand up and read their own copy. If they can't read it aloud, it ain't going to work. If it doesn't sound right, it isn't right. It's a very good, simple rule of thumb. Read it aloud.
That's honestly, Patrick, great advice. We do a lot of copy work, and in my world, in digital marketing, it's all about, well, how do we optimize this and how do we optimize that? Well, you know what? People lose sight of the brand, and I'm just very real, and I say, well, what about the brand? Because robots aren't going to buy your product or service, right? They might get your followers there, but it's about connecting, right, with the message being simple enough so people can take action. Also coupling that with the fact that, as you mentioned, which I loved, is there's just too much out there. So, and I think you've talked about, a little bit about what makes you different as well and your mission. So I know that you have a lot on your plate. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about things that you have coming up that are really interesting that people should look out for, or something that you've recently done, a project that you've been involved with that you think is interesting.
Well, here's a topical example, Jasmine, and it goes to the heart of what a brand is, actually. And remember, one of the things that we believe at JephsonBeaman is that a brand is not what the client says it is. A brand is what exists in the minds of the audience. It's not what you say it is, it's what they perceive it to be. That's the reality you work with. Now, we had a client quite recently in Houston, and we did a lot of work with them. Some quite straightforward media training, helping them prepare for that unwelcome TV slot when you don't want to be on TV, but you have to be. These things happen when you least expect them or want them. Being prepared for that, having your messages ready, having your 3 points in a form that other people can be interested in and understand. We did a lot of that work. And we surveyed with them possible threats that were coming at them, and we prepared them for those eventualities. The threat that was coming at them, nobody could foresee. It was Hurricane Harvey. And one of our clients, within a week of us finishing work with them, was on TV talking to nationwide news about what was happening to his brand under the stress of Hurricane Harvey. And we were able to prep him on the day, actually by phone. But he said afterwards, he said, your training came at exactly the right moment, because sure, we couldn't anticipate the hurricane, but the lessons you taught me, the habits I learned, the messaging styles and techniques that you taught me were immediately what I needed when dealing with how we were surviving the hurricane, and indeed how we were using the hurricane as an opportunity to explain some of our own core brand values.
Wow. Well, that's obviously extremely timely, and it's also about keeping people calm. So something that I wonder is, when executives that are your clients, or when you work with Princess or whomever, by reporters, like you said, TV interviews come at the time that you don't expect, and you have to be there. Have there been situations where you've had to coach people on how to tell the truth or answer things differently? Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I know that's certainly a concern for my audience.
Well, yes, it's something we do all the time. It's one of our core products, I would say.
Okay.
And again, it's something that we enjoy doing, because we have been on both sides of the story. We have been the journalist, but we have also I've been doorstepped lots of times, and it's not a pleasant experience, but you sure as heck learn from it. You raised the question of truth again there. Remember that telling the truth requires a great deal less mental energy than telling a lie. Look at the faces of politicians, for example, when they're caught in a lie. It is a simple piece of advice that we give our clients. You don't have to tell the whole truth, but what you do say has to be true. And so you can concentrate in your preparation on making sure that what you say is true, and deciding, perhaps in consultation with your legal advisors or your colleagues, what are the areas we don't want to go into, so that I don't have to lie or be caught out in misrepresenting the facts. That's something you can practice. It's definitely something that we teach, so that you are able to be truthful, and that you do give the audience a credible and consistent version of your side of the story. That's very important, but it does require practice, and that's something we do.
Okay, great. A couple more questions for you. So one is, the newest Princess Diana movie has been just released, correct?
No, I don't know what movie you're talking about, actually.
Or it's being, the most recent Princess Diana movie was out. What was the year of the most recent one?
I think there was one about 2 years ago.
Okay.
But I didn't see it.
Oh, okay. So I was just wondering if you were called upon for that.
Yes, they asked me, but I didn't actually help. I didn't like the way they were framing the story. A bit like we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
They had already decided what they wanted to say before they started speaking to the experts. Much better use of my experience, both then as Princess Diana's chief of staff, and now as a communications professional. What are you trying to say? Then let's discuss how best to say it.
I agree. Agreed. So a question that's a little bit off the cuff, I've been asking most of my guests is, I think it takes courage to tell the truth, and courage to be out there, and courage to even be on this podcast. So for me, all my guests are superheroes. So if you were a superhero, who would you be and why? And you can make it up.
Well, that's kind. Jasmine, I got to say, you can tell from my accent, I'm an American now, but I haven't always been an American. So I did not grow up with the culture of superheroes. And indeed, I haven't yet seen a superhero that I wanted to be. I think, but I have seen the Lego movie. And so I probably picture myself as Emmett in the Lego movie. He's a kind of anti-superhero. He has superherodom thrust upon him. And the way he responds to that, the way he knows best, which is to try his hardest and tell the truth. I think that's something that that's a pretty good superpower. I would aspire to that one.
Good. I think we all would. So last question is, for those that are watching and listening to this podcast, I'm sure that people want more information from you. So what are some ways that people could get in touch with you, contact you?
Well, the easiest way is to go to our consultancy website. It's JephsonBeaman.com. Let me see if I can hold up a business card to the camera. Does that work? Let me just see if I can do that. Saves me having to spell it.
It's JEPH
SON Beaman, BEAMAN.
Yes. We see
Jephson.
London and Washington.
Yep, JephsonBeaman.com.
Very good. We got it. All right, perfect. Well, Patrick, I'm sure I'll ask you to be a guest again on the show.
Well, it would be a pleasure. And this has been great fun, Jasmine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Very informative. I hope this information will help you make a quid or two. That would be aces. If you enjoyed this podcast, and I know that you did, please hit subscribe on iTunes and on YouTube. You can also support us through Patreon and becoming a board member. As a board member, you will get early access to episodes, top 5 lists from our guests, as well as various action plans, such as action plans for personal branding online, LinkedIn marketing, and much, much more.